Welcome to the EchoCast, episode 93. It's a new year, new DZ. This is a podcast about the Division 2, the franchise itself, the community, speculation, news, history, news again. I am Bond Diesel, and I do Division things, and some Escape from Tarkov things for now. Today, we are going to talk about some Division weekly news, some developer tweets, and what they might mean, 2020 speculation for Division 2, some community topics, my experience with Tarkov and how I think it could help Division, but they probably won't do anything like that, some listener questions, and content updates. If you would like to support this podcast or my other content, please check out patreon.com/theechocast. I do want to thank this month's supporters: Hassan, Christian, Darren, Justin, Tim, PK, and DJ. Okay, for the news recap. Okay, so I'm going to be straight up. There's not really anything to talk about. Therefore, I'm just going to pull some stuff out of nowhere. And I just want you to bear with me, because I think a week from now, episode 94 is going to be after the next day of the game. And I'm relatively certain we're going to get a bunch of episode 3 news next week. So hopefully I have something worth talking about. If you don't want to be here for that, that's fine. I get it. But let's jump right into it. So really the only news I could really kind of drag up was just noticing a lot of tweets or a lot of media, mostly from developers. You know, there's a few developers who are really active, some comm devs as well, and even the ETF members. And not for no confusion's sake, the Elite Task Force that, you know, a few months ago went to Malmo and they did a bunch of stuff. That's probably just we're probably gonna see the beginning of some of those changes at around episode 3, either, you know, in episode 3 or soon after. And what I'm seeing is essentially a borderline rehaul of the game. Through various tweets, I've kind of picked up that there's kind of hints that we may see another big reset of gear and things like that. That's gonna make people mad, but here's what I'm guessing this time. One, I'm guessing they're gonna change stuff and or add activity. That means that getting that gear again won't be that big of a deal, like, or at least it'll be worth doing. What I really think is going to happen is I think they're going to raise the gear score. I think that the last time they raised, they changed the gear system, you know, a few months ago. They didn't raise the gear score, so it just kind of updated everyone's gear, and then if you wanted to go forward again, you could. But from some of the screenshots we saw at the last day of the game and so on and so forth, I think that this time we're probably going to get new content. We better. And I suspect we may get a jump in the gear score. And the reason I think we will is because they proposed giving us slightly higher gear. It was 510, I think, in the DZ months ago. I want to say it was title update 5? I can't remember off the top of my head. And everyone lost their mind because no one wants to go into the DZ of the farm, and they pulled back on it. But it showed that they do intend to raise the gear score at some point. Now, whether they're going to do the maybe 550 or even, I think a nice even 600 would be nice. And it would probably mean a bit of a grind, I would hope. I think that's what's probably coming. But I really think there's probably a lot more. See, the problem is with the speculation is I try to be careful about overhyping things and getting too excited in general, not just with games, not just in my life in general. Kind of just try to go with it and experience things as they come, because let's be honest, the more that we hype stuff up, you know, the number of times we've been burned by hype is probably a much larger number than the number of times that hype has actually hyped us up. But I have a feeling, I'm guessing that, I mean, if you've seen the screenshots of the gear changes, I mean, drastic. It's essentially redoing the whole gear system. What I think is probably coming either in episode 3 or sometime after, hopefully soon after. What I'm guessing is that as drastic as the update is on the gear, it's going to be the same for weapons. It's going to be the same for attachments. It's going to be the same for, mods. It's going to be the same for the loot grind. It might be the same for the way that we get gear in general. So I think that people shouldn't just assume that we're maybe just going to get a slightly modified gear system. To me, it looks like a gear rehaul. And I suspect that that may exist throughout the entire game, that everything about the game may be rehauled. Whether we see this in episode 3 or not, people have to remember that with that gear system change, they did specifically say that that is not coming in episode 3, but that they would let us know. So hopefully it's coming soon after that or something. Whether it's episode 1 of year 2 or not. Well, so we'll have to see. Hopefully, maybe they'll clarify some of that in this coming state of the game. It's just, I've been around this game long enough. It's been 4 years now, almost. And, there's a mix of, people should be fairly cautious. Episode 1 and 2 were kind of a letdown. I think the actual game changes have been good. But the content has been mediocre, which might be generous. But what I will say is that even in Division 1, which it's just, there's nothing wrong with liking Division 1 still. And if you like Division 1 more than Division 2, all the power to you. There's definitely parts of Division 1 I do miss and I liked more. Mostly aesthetic stuff. Not really gameplay. I think gameplay in Division 2 is way better. But if you disagree with me, great. I disagree with you entirely, but that's fine. But what I remember about Division 1 is that when there were big changes, when there was big updates coming that people liked in hindsight, there was always this kind of like chatter, and there was this borderline cockiness and confidence coming from the devs and the CMs and the ETF people, and that's what I'm seeing. Even back after the ETF ended, there were people like Solid FPS and stuff who I know that if you look at his Twitch bio, he considers himself a Division main person, but he's playing Tarkov and stuff like everyone else right now. But even he seemed really excited, and the way he expressed it, I believe, was that, oh, I'm not playing Division 2 again until the stuff I saw is there. So that makes me excited for what's coming. It's just kind of a bummer we've had to wait for it, but that's the way these things go. So I don't know. I highly suggest you check out the devs and pay attention to their Twitters and social media feeds. Try to find the ETF people, the ones who have like outed themselves, who are involved in it. I do genuinely ask not to, be nice. If you have something critical to say, there is a way to say it without being an asshole. You don't have to antagonize and belittle and look down on these people who are making this game, because it doesn't help anything. I've seen a lot of that chatter. There's some people who are pretty consistent with it, and to a point I kind of appreciate that. People who are kind of like always assholes about it, but they're maybe somewhat reasonable. It's still kind of annoying, but it's fine. But for the love of God, don't be the person who is just god awful to them 1 minute and then licking their butts the next. I know I'm kind of an ass kisser, whatever, I don't care. I'm as critical of this game as anyone else is, but I also just happen to try to be nice to the people who make the game. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But, so maybe I'm in the middle and on one side, but don't be on the opposites. If you follow these devs, the CMs, ETF people, you don't have to kiss their asses, but you can at least be decent. Maybe talk to them the way you would in person, because I know that none of these people would be mean to these people in person. Or if they did, it'd just be super awkward and they would look silly. But check them out. There's a lot of hints and winks and nods going on, and I think it should be really exciting. The next thing is just kind of talking about what 2020 is going to mean for Division 2, what year 2 might kind of mean. Now, year 2 is probably going to stretch into the very beginning of 2021, but so what things do I think are going to happen? Obviously, episode 3 I assume is coming next month in February. Hopefully early mid would be nice. That'd be cool. That gives me enough time to play some other stuff too. I'm still finishing out a back catalog. In episode 3, we know it's in New York. We know we're hunting Keener. We know that from a couple interviews, that we're going to be in Brooklyn, we're going to be in Coney Island. I don't really know what that means. I don't know if it's going to be one big map or if there's going to be multiple, smaller parts of New York that we're going to go to. I've said it before, I'm going to say it again. Under no circumstances should people be getting their hopes up that we're going to have the full Manhattan map. It is not going to happen. The long of the short of it, from all of the information I've gathered since the Division 2 came out, is that, if I remember correctly, Division 1 was developed on like a 0.75 scale. So if you took the characters from Division 1 and put them into the real world, they would be like 5 foot tall is the impression I believe. That's I can't cite this. I can't remember where I've heard this. I feel like I've gotten little bits and pieces from going to events and talking to people, and I don't think I'm breaking any agreements or anything right now. But I believe, so even the world is, so like if you took the Empire State Building and Division 1 and put it beside the real one, it would be, 25% small. It'd be too small. And so that's why, people wonder why in Division 2 the characters move so weird and the animations are kind of odd. It seems, I'm under the impression that they couldn't just copy the characters, the character models and their skeletons and their animations from Division 1 over the 2, because since they use those techniques to do DC in a 1-to-1, everything's scale. So if they put the characters from the first game in the second game, they would be like 5 foot tall. And I assume the characters that we play as are supposed to be like 6 foot tall, is my guess. Even though they make this game in Sweden, so they probably assume everyone's like 6'6". But I'll digress. And I think you could even see some of that stuff about Division 1 in Division 1, where you would stand near like doorways and they would be like 10 foot tall doorways. I don't think it's that bad everywhere, but I think it's like in some of like the kind of the, like the random buildings that you can't go in and stuff that you'll notice there's some weird scaling. So what I'm getting at is I wouldn't expect Manhattan in episode 3. That would be, you're talking about essentially a Division 3 type of ask. Maybe we're going back, who knows? I think it's way too early to even consider Division 3, even though it wouldn't surprise me if there's at least talk happening about it. But yeah, so episode 3, the problem is I don't like how often there's people saying like, oh, it's just gonna be 2 missions and a specialization, and it's just gonna be the raid. Or I actually don't think it's gonna be the raid. I'm not under the impression they've given that assurance. So I wouldn't expect it. I'm wondering if the raid won't come till year 2, which makes me kind of wonder what the story of the raid is, because I assume it's maybe like its own little story on the side, whereas the current raid is fairly integral to the story. As for year 2, I don't know. See, the problem with year 2 is I think episode 3 is really important for year 2. I think episode 3, like I was saying, hopefully it's not just gonna be 2 missions and specialization. I'm really hoping that there is some type of new mode or something that happens that really pushes things forward and makes things more interesting. I just really hope there's something in episode 3 that is fun to go back and play over and over. It doesn't have to be survival. It doesn't have to be the underground. It can just be really good content. It can just be something that's really interesting to go back and play. I'm too stupid to know what that is. But what I'm saying is that there needs to be something about episode 3 that pulls people back and makes people go, oh, cool. This is fun. This is really cool. Because with year 2, I think it's all but assumed that year 2 is going to have some type of paid pass for the content. I think that's a bummer. I like the idea of free content because everyone stays on the same page. That said, I think that maybe most people could agree that maybe the reason we have seen some what I would call fairly mediocre content from year 1 of Division 2 is because it was free, and that they had to pay for it up front, and that there was nothing coming in to help pay for it, and there was no assurance it was going to make money. It's a bummer. Unfortunately, that's the way business works. I have a pretty good feeling that this probably didn't go the way that people at Massive would have liked, or Red Storm, or any of the kind of adjacent developer studios that worked with the game. But I have a feeling this is exactly how they were fine with it happening at Ubisoft headquarters. Not that they are cool with bad games, but if we look at their recent history and some of the delays and things that are going on, it seems like they got complacent, is probably the nicest way to say it. So for year two, I think it's going to be a paid one. I think, there's a few factors that, episode 3 needs to be really good to get people excited again, and to give people faith that paying for a year two is worth it. The price for a year two needs to be extremely reasonable. It needs to be 20 or 30 bucks max. I think 40 is super pushing it. 50 or 60 is, you're going to get laughed off the face of the earth. And I think the final thing is they need to be really transparent about what's coming. The way that they treated year one was kind of gross, and I have to be totally honest, it sort of feels like they maybe didn't tell us much about Kinley College, or they maybe didn't tell us much about the Pentagon before they were released, because they maybe were embarrassed about them, or maybe they knew that it wasn't going to live up to the expectations that people had. In Division 1 we had Survival, we had Underground, and while those I think get a little too much credit, a lot more credit than they deserve, they were very repetitive, and I think the average person would burn out on them within a week or two, and even a diehard like me got pretty sick of Survival after a couple months. I give that people still like it. I don't know how. I also played probably 5 or 6 times more than the average person, so that's fine. It's probably my problem, not yours. But this year one didn't have all of the year one content wise, not game change wise, but content wise. You talk about Kinley and some of the stuff that we've gotten. I mean, I would say all of it together, hasn't been as entertaining as Survival and Underground was. So, is that to blame for it being free? Maybe, I don't know. Maybe they just didn't have enough time. I'm under the impression that those projects got outsourced to other studios. Maybe those studios just weren't up for it. Kind of seems like that might be the case, but I don't know enough to know that that's what happened. It's just interesting because both of Kinley College and especially the Pentagon really seems like they probably intended on more, and budget, time, ability probably factored in, and we didn't get what maybe would have been cool to have. Maybe that changes in the long run. Maybe they made progress and just couldn't finish. We see things like hardcore mode that I assume is going to update and get more interesting and have more to do as time goes on. We'll have to see. But year two, I think the final factor is episode 3 needs to be good. It needs to be priced appropriately, and we need to know what's coming. Because here's the thing about year two, especially if it's going to be paid content, they can give us a general idea of what's coming, and that allows us to decide if it's worth our hard-earned money or not without spoiling anything. They don't have to tell us story. They don't have to give us super detailed information, but they can give us a reasonable amount of information for people to be educated consumers. Because here's the thing, say year one was paid. If year one, so what I'm saying, like if they would have come out before Division 2 came out and said, okay, episode 1 is going to be a bunch of updates to the game, which are great, and it's going to be a college map where you do missions in 3 different parts, and then a gear room opens up and you get some gear. Okay, that's episode 1. Now episode 2 is going to be the Pentagon. Really cool, right? Okay, so what the Pentagon's going to be is an intro mission and then 2 big story missions. That's episode 2. And then a bunch of game updates. And then episode 3, blah, blah, blah. If they would have come out and said that, people probably would have been like, ew, that doesn't sound like enough. But at least they're telling us, like, oh, okay. And then we would have had no idea what Kinley College was, what the implications were. Nothing would have been spoiled. It would have been fine. And that's what I think we have to have for a successful year 2. They need to tell us, hey, episode 1 of year 2 is going to have this type of activity. Episode 2 is going to have this type. And episode 3, this type. Outside of those episodes, we want to put in stuff that does this and does that and this thing and that thing. But they don't have to give away a single story cue. They don't have to give away a single bit of information that spoils anything. I really hope that they do that, because that they really need to sell people on year 2. I'm gonna buy it either way, I'm sure, but even I'm a hair skeptical at this point, because we still don't have any information about year 3 or about episode 3. We will in a week, I'm sure, but like we don't know. We have no idea what it's gonna be. It's all speculation right now, besides some really tiny details, and that's frustrating. I don't like that. I think that's kind of annoying, because it allows the people who think it's just going to be 2 missions and a specialization to have an audience, because maybe they're right. We have no idea. So I don't know. It's frustrating for me. I love the game. I think the game's awesome. I think the people who work on it are great. Everyone I've dealt with has always been really fun and cool and nice to deal with. But I suspect they're hamstrung in their own ways. Someone may be listening to this nodding and saying, yes, that's exactly what we want to do, but we're not allowed. And that's a bummer. So whoever your boss is, make them listen to this podcast, make them get a Twitter account and say that they're the ones who make these decisions, and then they can hear from the people, even though that would be kind of a nightmare, because it wouldn't be the reasonable ones coming out, more than likely. As for hardcore, I suspect we'll get a few updates in 2020 to hardcore, hopefully making it a little bit more interesting. I actually kind of lost complete interest in it. I'm level like 7 or 8 or something. I'm sure I'll get back to it. I'm a little distracted by other stuff right now, but it also just, I realize that as soon as I die, I'm just gonna stop. Like, I'm not gonna go back and play again. It's fine. I have to be honest, I haven't even played Division in a few weeks. I jump on here and there, run a few missions, do some bounties, do some side stuff, just to stay fresh. And there are still a few named items I'm going after, but I'm definitely kind of in with getting to my backlog and then getting super hyped for episode 3. But hopefully our hardcore gets some updates. I'd really like to see it turn into something, which I'll talk about in a moment. E3 should be interesting. I suspect E3, it comes in June. If we do a year 2 structure similar to what Division 2 year 1 had, we'll probably get episode 1 before E3, maybe. I hope so. And then so maybe E3 will be about like episode 2 and some other stuff. I hope they feature it. I mean, I hope they give us spot. Last year was really cool with Terry Spear getting to speak about what was going on, and then being able to show the trailer for episode 3, which was still one of my favorite trailers I've seen in quite a while. It's just cool. It's very exciting. So hopefully E3 maybe gives us something interesting to talk about. And then the new gen consoles we'll have at the end of the year, I suspect in November-ish. And there's a lot of talk about that, whether or not games like Division 2 are going to have to work on backwards compatibility. From all the research I've been doing and kind of digging I've been doing, I actually think Division 2 and all of the other like Xbox One games, I can only speak for Xbox, are actually going to be native on the new console, on the Series X. And the reason I think that is because the original Xbox ran on like a normal computer architecture. The Xbox 360 moved to a proprietary system that had to use like an emulator to play Xbox games. And then the Xbox One moved back to a regular computer architecture. And the Series X is continuing that. So because it's the first time that Xbox hasn't changed its architecture, I suspect that the move from Xbox One to Series X is essentially going to be like the move from the original Xbox One to the One X, where the big issue there is going to be eventually the Series X games are going to be too powerful or going to be too demanding for the original Xboxes. And that's where I think that Microsoft is going to say, hey, you have an original Xbox, you can't play this game because it's too powerful, but you can play it through xCloud. And you can stream the game through your Xbox One because it's plenty powerful to do that. That's my guess. I'm really interested to see whether I'm right or not. I hope I am, because I really hope that I get to play Division 2 day 1 of the Series X, and I get to, hopefully they have a patch ready, or they have one come out relatively soon that has, actual 4K graphics and like 120 FPS, and it looks amazing and feels great. You can maybe even use your mouse and keyboard on it. Who knows? We'll get there. We'll figure that stuff out eventually. But yeah, so I think that's going to be an interesting step for Division 2 as well, and all games. I mean, this is going to be a really fun year for video games. So even though this podcast focuses on Division 2, don't sit on this year. It's gonna be really cool. Then kind of the last thing I have here is just I've been playing a lot of Escape from Tarkov. I've even streamed it a few times. I wasn't sure if my rig can handle it, and apparently it can. So it's been a lot of fun. It's a really cool game. I really like it. I've seen a lot of people from the Division community playing it. That has been an interesting thing in my opinion, though, because there's so many people saying like, oh, if, Division 2, the DZs let you down. Check out Tarkov. And what I think is interesting about that is it shows just how warped people's expectations are of Division compared to the reality of the game. The Division 1, I think, made a big mistake of, well, it was one of the premier examples back in 2013 and even after that of Ubisoft showing amazing fidelity games and then putting out games that didn't quite look the same. Division 1 I think actually still looked pretty good, but Ubisoft had other games like Assassin's Creed, and there are various other games they put out where they made them look amazing in their trailers, and then they came out and they weren't quite that impressive. Division 1 still looks really good, but it doesn't look, I mean, if you go back and look at the old trailers, it doesn't look anything like what they showed back then. Division 2 doesn't even. It's definitely closer, honestly, but it's not quite there either. But they marketed Division 2 much better. But what I'm getting at here is that, the DZ before Division 1 came out was kind of like this like lawless land where anything can happen and friends turn on friends. And it's like, I mean, that can happen, I guess, but that's not what it is. If you really think about the DZ, and if you've played a decent amount of it, I definitely played more of it in Division 1 than I have in 2, but I've earned my stake in both. I think you can disagree, that's fine. And what it really is, it's just kind of like a gank zone where some people are farm and then some people just want to shoot other people with OP builds, and they don't really want to die, like they don't really want to fight, they just want to kill. And it's not what people expected, but it is what it is. And 4 years later, I think it's just interesting that there's a lot of people with Division who still want or expect Division to become a thing that they want, that there's no indication it's ever going to be when it comes to actual development. Now, on the other hand, these people have found something in Tarkov that is kind of that ultimate gaming experience of like super brutal, super rewarding, and super punishing, but it's nothing like Division. So I've seen some of this like, hey, if you like the DZ and Division, you should check out Tarkov. No, that is wrong. Because half the complaints and most of the people I've seen so upset about Division 2 seem to not like that they could die too quickly, and that they could die at all, and that they didn't have their striker or their nomad build anymore to borderline exploit the game to beat people who didn't know what they were doing. And if that stuff, like if you liked that like OP-ness and all that stuff of Division 1 DZ, and I guess some of the super armor builds in Division 2, if that's what you like, you will not like Tarkov. In Tarkov, you can be the most experienced player in the game with the best gear in the game that you've grinded and worked for and just crawled for and gotten, and a player who is starting with a super cheap gun and a little bit expensive ammo can one-shot you and take everything you have. So I do think it's kind of interesting. Like, I get why there's people who like Division and Tarkov. That includes myself. But I question the people who like it because they think it's the same. I like it because it's so much different. And Tarkov, when I kill someone or I'm killed, I feel like there was a battle of wits that happened there and a battle of skill. In Division, whether it was 1 or 2, I've just never felt that way. I've always just been like, well, my build sucked, I didn't time things right, but whatever. It just doesn't have the same feeling. The other part of Tarkov is I actually hope that one cool thing that could happen in Division 2 Hardcore is if instead of when you die you lose everything, your character gets deleted and you start over. I wish that you would keep your level, and that maybe you could keep a small cache and that when you die in hardcore, you don't lose your character entirely, but you do lose everything that was on them. That they could make like a from 1 to 30 up to gear score 500. There could be like a green gear basic build that when you die, you get automatically. So you can farm for stuff again, but it's gonna be hard. And you can have maybe like a 20-piece stash or something where you can, if you store a few guns and some pieces of armor, it helps you get back into the groove a little bit faster. Still punishing, because if you want to run with your best gear and you die, you still lose every piece of it. It's gone forever. Can't get it back. But then it doesn't have that huge punishment of you literally start over the whole game from scratch. Because I like the single player, I like the story, but it's not really compelling enough to really convince me to play it over and over and over and over and over again. And that's kind of how Escape from Tarkov works. If you die in Escape from Tarkov, everything your character was wearing is gone, but you don't lose like your character's level in the skill progression you've had, and like the different progressions on quests and missions and stuff like that. So after playing it a bit, like, man, that would be such a good fit for hardcore. And it would make it where like you could get this gear score 500 and you could go in the DZ, and if you die, all your gear drops and you don't get it back. You spawn with a bunch of crappy gear and you have to go out and farm again, but you don't have to start from level 1 again. I'm sure there's some people who like that aspect of it, but I have no interest in that. Maybe it's not designed for me and it's working perfectly as expected. I'm not sure. I'm also not sure whether or not you want to listen to this mid-roll, but it's coming anyways. Okay, so to kind of wrap this stream up, I'm going to do a few community topics, a couple of listener questions, some content updates, and then we will get out of here. A couple of community topics I found on Reddit. There was a really cool post of someone's, the title of the post was, "This game is fun." And it was really nice to read, and obviously I'm pretty positive about the game, so maybe I'm just a shill in that way. But what was cool about it was that like they were just pointing out that like it's a good game. It's not perfect, it needs content. A lot of people's complaints are perfectly valid, but despite those things, it's a really good game and it is fun to play. The loop is cool and it sounds like it's only gonna get better. There's nothing wrong with being negative, and it was really cool seeing a bunch of the responses. Now, obviously, there's some of the expected assholes in there. That's fine, but like the responses were like, "Yeah, like I've played this game for hundreds of hours, and it's fun. I'm playing some other stuff, but there's nothing wrong with that." It was just a nice post. So if you are on the subreddit, you can probably search for the title. It's "This Game is Fun." I suggest taking a peek at it. It was just nice to see, and it was nice to see mostly people responding in ways of saying like, yeah, the game's not perfect. It's definitely worth, criticizing and aspects, but overall, it's a really cool game. And then I saw another one that said, "Why does everyone shoot on sight?" And they're talking about the DZ and the ODZ. And what's interesting about this game is, and this is going to take back to Escape from Tarkov, is there is a culture in Escape from Tarkov. It's very small. It's not very many people. But there are some players in the game who, if you see them, there's what they do is they wiggle, they lean side to side, and there's kind of like an unspoken language of like, if someone does that, so they're probably seeing if you want to cooperate and extract together and get through the raid together. Now that can turn in a second. They, as soon as you're not paying attention, they can shoot you in the head and take everything. But a lot of times they don't, and you see a lot of stories on their subreddit of people meeting up, kind of cautiously working together and then extracting, and maybe they play together more after that or whatever. So the Division just doesn't have that culture. There have been times I've been farming in the DZ, and there's been someone who's run up on the checkpoint that I'm going at as well, or the landmark. And there's kind of this like, you kind of keep an eye on them, make sure, see if they're, flagging rogue or not and whatever. And there's been a few times I've teamed up with people. They've sent me an invite, I've sent them one. We ran some landmarks together, and that was cool. But it is not common. Or people just run away because they're afraid you're going to kill them, or vice versa. I think that in the Division, it just never developed that culture in this game of of that, like, and maybe it's because there isn't a good way to communicate that you're willing to cooperate. Maybe it's because the people who are, you know, the people who are more dragged towards the DZ aren't the type who want to do that. A game like Escape from Tarkov, I mean, you can basically be a PvE player in Tarkov, and if you just assume every time you meet another player you're just gonna die, like, that's fine. That's definitely possible, but that just isn't in the Division. And in the Division, I still believe that, you know, the DZs are meant to be farming zones where you should expect PvP. I've been eviscerated for saying that before, which led to a whole bunch of fun conversations, which we'll try to get over in the new year. But, you know, still, kind of what I'm saying is, I just don't think the game has that culture, and I think at this point it probably never will, unless there's some like really drastic changes in the way the game works to like borderline force people to cooperate in that way. So, you know, is what it is. Okay, so a couple listener questions here. I have a couple from Mick Short on the Discord. It says, at the time of writing, New Year's Eve was your and Lady Bond's drink and snack of choice to end the year with a little one tucked up in bed. Lady Bond's preferred drink is either Screwdriver or Apple, the Angry Orchard drinks. Mine is basically the same. I tried to pretend I like beer for a long time, and I just don't. For snacks, we'll both take about anything. Is pizza a snack? Or can I just say like pizza bites? I'll take that. That sounds delicious. Or honestly, just like some like taters and nugs. Some chicken nuggets and tater tots. Anyways, I'm hungry, if you can't tell. The next question from Mick Short: do you think we might get any extra stories on, say, Kelso and Manny doing a mission in the past together? Also, would you do a voice acting gig if the devs asked? I think we'll definitely. I don't know. I'm curious about like Kelso. I have a feeling that we may actually see a Kelso Fei Lao meetup. I think that when our character goes to New York, I suspect it's gonna be like with Kelso. Like it's gonna be like a buddy cop thing. And that gets us there, and then we'll be on our own once we get there. But I think that maybe, you know, Kelso's gonna go to the Boo, and her and Fei Lao are gonna be the ones that like direct us around to do what we're gonna do there. But as for Manny and all that backstory on that, maybe, I don't know. The storytelling in this game, even in the first one, honestly, has been so like all over the place that I just have no idea. As for the second part of that question, if I would do voice acting, absolutely. I would love to do voice acting. I don't really know if I have the voice for it. I don't know if I have the reading capability or the acting capability to do that. But yes, I would absolutely record something to go into a video game. That would be amazing. Then the last question from Mick Short: do you think out of the who do you think out of the big 5 fast food chains has the best burger and chicken? So my wife and I were talking about your question because we were trying to figure out who the big 5 were. See, in my area, it's Wendy's, McDonald's, and Burger King. I guess I would throw in maybe like White Castle. I don't know who else to throw in where I live. I live in the Midwest. I don't consider places like Five Guys or Whataburger and like those kind of places, or Smashburger, I don't consider those like that fast food. They're more like fine fast or whatever, like Chipotle or whatever. So for me, my favorite burger from fast food is absolutely the Baconator from Wendy's. That's why I have the beautiful physique I have, I'm sure. And as for chicken, I'd probably go Wendy's again. I'm a pretty big Wendy's fan. Yeah. So for both of those, that's what I would say Wendy's. So you can appreciate my fat Midwestern opinion. Mick Short, thank you very much for the questions. Truth on Discord had a couple questions as well. Do you play in random groups or mostly solo? Do you use the random matchmaking feature, or do you play with a core group of friends? If you are grouped, which mode do you play? Challenging, heroic, so on and so forth. I am like a 95% solo player. Sometimes when I'm playing, whether it's on stream or not, I'm talking about Division here, I'll like randomly matchmake just with whoever. And that is fine. I think Division handles matchmaking pretty well. Um, when I got into the community, there was kind of a core group I did play with. There's a couple streamers and a couple friends of those streamers. I don't really talk to those people anymore. Just kind of bygones are bygones. And at this point, like, my viewers don't really like ask to play with me. Every now and then they do. But I think they kind of can tell that I like to play by myself. So that's definitely my preference, is solo play, even in Escape from Tarkov, which is a game that you should play with other people. You absolutely should group up, because it's way less, it's still pretty brutal, but it's less brutal with a team. I've not played with another person yet in Escape from Tarkov, so I definitely find I'm a very solo type of player. I was the same in Division 1, so and even solo, though, I do like doing challenging missions on my own. I've done a few heroics on my own, but when I do heroics, I tend to try to matchmake. Then second question from Truth. This question piggybacks off the other question. If you do group up to do missions, are you finding it more and more difficult to find groups complete content with? I'm finding it difficult to get full group for heroic and evaded missions, and when I do, the other members are typically severely under geared for the task. Have you come across this issue? So I think this is just kind of a question of, is the player base a little small right now? I imagine it probably is. I think there's probably a bunch of new players. They had the free weekend, and then they had the sale. I want to say Division 2 was like $15 at one point around Christmas, and it has been multiple times. I know that's been a big naysayer point of, oh, look how cheap it is, it must be a garbage game. Not really. They're trying to get people in, probably for year 2, I imagine, to try and make money off year 2 if they do a paid content drop. So you're probably dealing with a lot of people who don't really know, who have just started the game fairly in the last month or two. The last time I played quite a bit, it's probably about a month ago, and then I wasn't having issues. I do live in the United States. I do live in the Eastern time zone. I do play on Xbox, which in theory is probably the smallest player population. But I haven't noticed issues. I also don't matchmake very often. So it wouldn't surprise me if people are having issues, especially at weird hours or in places like Australia and in like lower populated areas. I hope episode 3 and year 2 can change that, but we'll see. Thank you for the question. If you have any questions, you can ask. I make it available on the YouTube video, on Discord, on Twitter, on my Patreon, basically anywhere you can contact me. Feel free to ask questions or give me ideas for topics to talk about. I am happy to take your suggestion. As for some content updates, I'm streaming Sunday, Wednesday, Saturdays now. Mostly Escape from Tarkov for the moment, but once episode 3 gets announced and we know some stuff, I'll probably go back and start playing some of that, especially when it drops. Saturdays and Sundays are mostly going to be like late morning Eastern time, but maybe in the evenings if Bay Diesel is busy and I need to watch the little one. We do have the 100th episode coming up. We're at 93 currently, so less than 2 months until the 100th episode, which hopefully we'll have a whole bunch of fun stuff to talk about. I am curious about, maybe doing something special, maybe doing like a live recording on Twitch and then doing some like a long stream. Maybe do like a long stream for me is 4, 5, 6 hours. So I am not a full-timer. I have a regular life and job. And maybe have a guest on the show. I'm trying to arrange something right now, but it may not work out. I'm trying to arrange a guest who can talk about episode 3 and what's coming in Division 2, but I may have to wait until after episode 3 to do that. So hopefully, I haven't had a guest on this show since episode like 20 or something. It's been a while. It's hard to put together. People don't really ask. And honestly, it's just so much easier for me just to record this and put it out. But I do want to do something special, and maybe try to step the game up a bit this year. And last, okay, so it was Punk RL 1, the teddy bear. I still haven't sent that thing out. I am so sorry. I am the worst. Holidays are super crazy. I thought I had plenty of time. I haven't. It will come soon. If you listen to the podcast, I'm so sorry, but it's coming. And with that, we'll wrap this baby up. If you want to support the podcast or my other content, please check out patreon.com/theechocast. If you listen on iTunes, please rate the podcast and leave a review. It helps me get noticed. I am Bon Diesel on Twitch, where I stream 3 or so times a week. I am also at Bon Diesel on Twitter, where you can catch my state of the game live tweets and various other thoughts about the Division and lots of other things. If you want some cool EchoCast or Bon Diesel merch, check out bondiesel.live/merch. That's all I have, so until next time.